Good evening. My name is Dr. Wartina Davis. I'm serving as Interim Associate Dean for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and I'm also a Professor of Political Science here at William Patterson University. And it's my pleasure to moderate the panel of such distinguished key officials in the Passaic County area. So the way we're going to do this structurally is I'm going to just go straight into, I'm going to make very short introductions, and then we're going to go straight into questions, and then at the very end I'll leave a couple of minutes for each person to wrap up or say any concluding comments that they'd like to make. Okay? So on the panel we have the Honorable Michael D. Francisi, the former mayor of the Township of Little Falls, and he was employed as Assistant Deputy of Enforcement for New York Office of the Attorney General, Division of Consumer Affairs from 2010 to 2012. He served as a member of the Governor Christie's Passaic Valley Basin Flood Advisory Committee, and he's currently Assistant to the Executive Director at Passaic Valley Sewage Commission. He is a William Patterson alum. On this end, we have Mr. George Holsaffel, and he is the Director of Public Works at the Wayne Township. He's a licensed professional engineer, certified floodplain manager, and he's worked in the township for 27 years. To my immediate left is the Honorable Jeff Jones. He's the 45th mayor of the city of Patterson since 2010. In the years before that, he served on the city council, as well as being council president. Mr. Jones is an alumnus. He earned a BS degree in sociology, criminal justice from here, and a master's in urban education from William Patterson. He's also served as an adjunct professor here. He is also a member, served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 4 years. And to my right is the Honorable Scott Rumana. He is Assemblyman for the 40th district in the New Jersey State Assembly. He's been there since 2007, and prior to this position, he was the mayor of Wayne. He was elected to the mayor of Wayne in 2004 and 2005. He currently serves as the Republican Assembly Whip and member of the Education Committee. He was appointed by Governor Christie as a member of the Passaic River Basin Flood Advisory Commission, and he's also the chairman and founder of the Passaic River Flood Control Task Force. So if you'll join me in welcoming the panel.
Thank you.
So, first question. As we've heard referenced several times, in April 2010, Governor Christie, by executive order, created a commission with the explicit responsibility to come up with recommendations for how to deal with flooding in the Passaic area. The commission gave its report and gave 15 recommendations, some large, some small. And the first question is to discuss from your perspective these recommendations. And we can just go right, we'll go left to right. No, right to left, I'm sorry. Right to left.
You're up. Guess I'm first. Thank you. You know, Dave Rosenblatt, who was one of the previous panel members, talked about our work with the Governor's Flood Commission. It was a daunting task to try to put together some of these recommendations after about a year's worth of public meetings and private meetings. He talked about Dr. Jerry Galloway and what he said. The one thing that Dave did say that I think that everyone has to keep in mind here when we talk about long-term flood mitigation roles is that we will never be able to control every single flood that happens. And Dr. Galloway, as he had said, probably changed his thinking after researching the many, many years' worth of flooding issues in places that he had been. The night that he spoke to us, he had just returned from China, where they unfortunately regularly lose many, many lives in the flooding events that occur there. So with that perspective, and when we were putting together this report, the recommendations that we made were some small and some large, as Dr. Davis had said. There are many, many things that are being done today that weren't done prior to the issuance of this report. I think one of the panel members previously had said, is it enough? And I know that a lot of people in the audience, and unfortunately, many of you are very familiar to us from the different meetings that we've been to, from people from my hometown and when I was mayor, and many of the same people are here because they are as concerned about this. the Commission's report is not the silver bullet that people have said or people are looking for. What it is, I believe, and I don't want to talk out of school here, but I think what it is it's a tangible set of programs that we can take together to try to mitigate most of the damage that occurs on a regular basis with our regular floods. Our regular floods, unfortunately, have been the spring storms, the ones that we suffered in March 2010, and then almost exactly a year later, March 2011. For many people, though, the bellwether here that people are using is Hurricane Irene, which really was the anomaly and was not the storm that we're used to. Many things that we will do in the future will, I think, be predicted by the mitigation attempts that we make with the majority of the storms, but not every storm. And what we've done in Little Falls, we have about 77 homes now that are in the process, with 20 more getting ready to go, to be actively either raised or acquired. As one of those projects in the Commission's report stated. The point is that we have to try to remove people from some of these areas, as painful as that may be. It's just not cost effective to try to keep throwing good money after bad in some of these locations that are just going to continually flood. Believe me, no one here had their fingers crossed as much as I did this past spring, knowing that second or third week of March was coming. And I think that we're all very relieved that we didn't have the rains, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to come again. Thank you.
Are we making progress? Yeah, we are making progress. It's clearly not at the rate that anybody wants. We want to see this fixed immediately. We've lived with the problem too long. I can state this unequivocally. Having worked in government, I got elected back in 1993, so I've worked at this point with, I think, 6 different governors. I can unequivocally state that this governor has dedicated more of his energy and effort to helping us in the Passaic River Basin. I don't care about any other problem throughout the state. I'm just talking about exclusively this issue. This administration has done more to help out all of us in the Passaic River Basin more than any other administration in the past, at least in the 6 that I've worked with. Now, with that, we've made some headway. The buyout program is moving along nicely. The elevation program is moving along nicely. The snagging work, some of that has been done throughout this spring. But I have to tell you, and anybody who knows where I'm coming from on this issue and where I keep on trying to drive this bus, is about trying to fix the big problems. Because let's lay out what the statistic is. If you take the 8 largest floods in the last 110 years, 5 of the 8 occurred in the last 6 years. And what's most telling is our panelist from the Army Corps, who is being very open with everybody, that this may be a real consistent pattern. We escaped the snow this winter, and we've escaped heavy storms this spring. And right now, that river is pretty low. As I look out in the audience, I see Councilman Purcell here, who lives in the 1st Ward, and he knows what I'm talking about. We're looking out at the river, and the river's low. But that's not going to stay low. It's coming back, and we're going to suffer these same big floods again. And all the little stuff that we do, it will be helpful for those smaller events, but those 5 big ones that we've just suffered through, and the additional big ones that are going to keep on coming, that's where we have to keep on looking at how we fix those problems, and we'll get more into this later on. I just have to stress that the only way you're going to solve those big flooding problems is with a big solution. And we all need to be on board with that effort and get behind that effort and support our federal officials, our state officials moving in that direction so that we can ultimately live here, work here, commute through here and in here. I mean, all that we do with our lives in this region is affected by this flooding problem, and if we don't fix that flooding problem, we're going to lose our way of life. That's how critical the issue is.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Jones, bear the title of Mayor, City of Patterson. Unfortunately, as this Flood River Basin Advisory Commission is established, I was not a part of that conversation. I have been, we have been, the City of Patterson, not quite invited to that proverbial table. While I know discussions have happened, and we like to believe that at some point in time we will be, to offer some real value add, we are still wondering why, I know I am, why the conversations often end up with, just hold on, you'll see. I think many of you here today are saying, we're tired of holding on. I will say to you that I was not at the least bit excited to hear about the glacial movement. No offense, I'm sure it took a lot of time to see about how the rock slid and moved the earth and sheared off this and that. I think all that was fine. But if you're trying to say that specifically as a result of, I think it was 300 million years, 3 million years, 300 years, or whatever the case was, that things have changed, the terrain has changed, okay, say that. But talk to us about the flooding. Talk to us about how we communicate. Talk to us about the downstream effect, me being Patterson, no USGS gauge at the lowest possible tier of the basin. Talk about how, if we've known this and we thought this was an issue, why we didn't talk about something a little earlier or sooner. There are some other conversations I believe need to be had that have not been had. I believe that if the end game is to say that let's shift our position from asking the question why and what was or wasn't done adequately, or how do we, if we've known this long history of flooding, we have not made better preparation, then let's say that's not tonight's conversation. If it's to tell us a history lesson about geology, then okay, fine, I'll sign up for that class too. But that wasn't what I came here for tonight. I will say to you, and I understand that the question was, I'm going to try to answer to the question. I got the 15 points a couple weeks ago up in Pompton Lakes. Never been invited prior to the flood, and we went and we received this report. And to my dismay, I was told it's not for like discussion. There was a whole lot of discussion with experts outlining a whole lot of things, but this isn't about discussion. That's how it came to me. And from some of the sentiments here in the room, and particularly with 140,000+ residents, who could not travel through their city for almost 2.5 weeks, where kids were displaced in schools, where feces and a whole bunch of other things were floating down, where the neighboring town, because of what services it offers, shut down because of the flood, obviously, and those services, we wind up getting a whole bucket full, and I'm using the word bucket loosely, a whole bucket full of things that are both health-related, EPA-related, DEP-related. Well, those organizations have been in effect for a while. These storms, these floods have been in effect for a while. So what did the data tell you for a while that you could have told us for a while that we could have prepared for a while? Well, this ain't the while, it appears, you think. So I'm not here to be anything other than to tell you what it feels like to be ultimately downstream, trying to hold back the flood, and everybody tell me it's not flooding.
For Wayne Township, and from my perspective, the 15 points have been very good. They have specifically directed, in my opinion, the DEP staff guidance. This is where the state of New Jersey and its staff wants to go. It's also given guidance to the municipality, Wayne Township in particular, saying, this is where the state is going to go. Let's work with that program. And as Assemblyman Romano says, it's not silver bullet. There's big problems with flooding. I don't know if people saw, but while the storm of record, it was 1903, there were 3 or 4 other storms equal or larger than the Hurricane Lee event that we experienced. So we're going to have floods. A big problem can only be solved by taking steps. And the 15-point plan provides steps. Maybe they're baby steps, but they're the first steps that we've been able to take, and we've gotten good cooperation with the state of New Jersey. We got a desnagging program grant. Wayne Township and the three other communities have been involved. Now, maybe desnagging is not going to solve the big flood, but it's a start. We've gotten direction on where we want to go. We're focusing on those points, and we're going to go. Hopefully, as we move through this 15-point plan, the steps can get bigger, and maybe other solutions can come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the next question is, do you feel that there was an adequate federal and state response? And if so, tell us why. And if not, would you share with us some ways that you think there could have been a greater response?
Thank you. In terms of the response, one of the problems that we are all faced with is that we live in such small communities and are sharing a major problem. For us locally, and I will only talk about my feelings in terms of what happened to us locally. We had 4 major floods in the last 3 years, and what grew from that was a pretty comprehensive emergency management plan that we were able to develop. Like Bob Lyons said from Passaic County, it may not be perfect, but I believe that it was much better. It was much better done than it had been done in the past. At that point in time, when an emergency, and I'm sure Mayor Jones and former Mayor Romano will tell you, when an emergency hits your particular area, you're concerned with your particular area. We really had no federal government response in terms of the immediate flooding, and really no state, because we didn't need them. Now, that doesn't mean that they weren't there or not ready to pitch in a hand if we needed it. The OEM coordinator in our town deals directly with Bob Lyons and his crew, who then deal directly with the state police and the ROC. And that's the chain of command, and that's the way that it's set up. So in terms of our responsibility, or whether or not we had adequate responses from the state or federal level, I know that they were there. I know that they were certainly part of the decision-making processes once the declarations of disaster were made by all of us. But we didn't have that initial reason to bring them in, because our development of our hazardous plan, of our OEM plan, really worked out very well for us. Because there's a timeline when these floods occur, as you well know. There's an anticipation that it's going to happen because you read the gauges, or at least many of the gauges that are out there. As the water filters down, and Mayor Jones was probably the last one to get it, and we were pretty close to that. As it fills up in those areas that we're familiar with, there's some downtime then. As that water comes up, evacuations occur, you put in place your plan. And then there's almost that pregnant pause time where you're waiting for the water to go down. That time is really the time then to identify locally what plan and how that plan is going to go into effect, because none of the real drama has started until the water goes down, and you know what I'm talking about. So at that point in time, you really better have in place a solid plan to get people back in their homes, to get them pumped out, to have the wherewithal and the services available. You've now got probably, for us, 4 to 5 days. That's the way that those storms are before the water starts to recede. And then there's a gang rush of people trying to get back in there. So it's really a delicate balance to try to provide to the residents to get them back in there and to try to start to get people back to normal. Thank you.
If you're looking at this from purely a response perspective, first of all, as Mayor DeFrancisci just mentioned, you know, most of response comes from the local emergency management folks, the local police department, local fire department, first aid squads. The state and federal government adds support for the local emergency management people, local first responders. So if you're looking at it only in that light, I mean, I don't see a big problem with the way the federal and state governments responded, because they were giving the support that they needed. They clearly brought in, if you're talking about Hurricane Irene, I mean, the National Guard was in here really doing a great job helping out all of our local folks. Just to give everybody some insight, because looking around the room, I'm sure not too many people were on any of these conference calls, but I've never seen a better organized emergency management response than what took place during Hurricane Irene. As I said in the first answer, and I've served since 1994, I have never in my life witnessed something like what we saw during Hurricane Irene. The governor had us on conference calls almost every single night. If not, it was every night. I'm starting to lose track of how many times we were on there. And we got briefings from the colonel or the superintendent of the state police, from DOT, from the BPU, from the governor himself, from, I mean, you name it. Everybody involved in state government was on the phone call. Every mayor in the state could participate in that call, and it was one of the best run operations I think you'll ever witness, and I'm sure that will be replicated over time. But everybody out there, what you're seeing is the local police department getting out of your home, the local fire department getting out of your home. I've always been proud of the folks that serve in the communities that I've been a part of. I can tell you, as I've heard the frustrations from people, at the same time, I get that. But at the same time, you got to bear with, we're working with volunteers. They're breaking their hump all night long, 24 hours a day, for days on end, trying to help out people. So unfortunately, we have a well-oiled machine around here because we deal with so much flooding. But it's good. If you're looking at the response perspective, though, more broadly, then no, we need a lot more from the federal government and a lot more from our state government to address the ultimate problem. Responding in terms of getting people out of their home or getting them back in their home, that's great. But the response that we want to know is about fixing the problem so that we don't have to live with the problem. We want to be able to, as I said earlier, we want to be able to live here, work here, commute through here without having to go through flood water and live with that flood water. We're a developed area at this point. I think the mayor hit it right on the head. Whatever was 400 million years ago was 400 million years ago. We are now in 2012. We are in the hottest real estate market in the world. We are within 20 minutes of New York City. This is the reason why the region developed. Forget about the statement that it's some fat cat developer who wanted to make money. Yeah, we got to deal with that. I get that. But the reality is that we live in one of the most densely populated regions in the world, and we live in an area that supports New York City. We have people who work there every day of their lives and commute back home to our region. The area was developed because of that. And we have to witness or recognize that, so that you're not going to scoop everybody up. You're not going to scoop up hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of jobs, millions of commuting moves, and plop them someplace else out of the flood region. It is not even rational to say it.
Thank you.
So don't talk to me about we're going to buy out the whole problem. We're never buying out the whole problem. You have to solve the problem. You can't buy it all out. I'll end on that. Thank you.
The question is, do you feel that there was adequate federal and/or state response? I'm still waiting. We're still waiting. We're hoping. We're open. We're hoping. We've seen some progress. We've seen conversations and some actions with respect to what they call Blue Acres. It's, my cynicism is because we go through it. We go through it, and you'd like to be involved and invited to the discussion before the problem occurs, because when it happens, you're going to be the most victimized, at least you believe. But clearly, we all were victimized. Let me, if I can, take you back for a moment to where Irene and Lee arrived. You may recall that Irene and Lee came, but before they came, a windstorm came. you may recall that trees were down quite significantly, and we were all in some kind of a way dealing with major branches and trees all over the place. Now, Patterson's 8.4 square miles. The Passaic River runs around the back end of us by Route 20, McLean Boulevard. And it starts at our falls, the basin of the falls. It works its way and cuts off 5 bridges along River Street. Getting the picture? We're dealing with down trees everywhere, huge trees. So our DPW is already engaged. Oh, by the way, we are part of mutual aid, so we support every town close to us, police and fire, emergency services. So we're already at our maximum trying to cut down trees and move them off roadways. Folks with big trees in their yards, down utility lines, we're in it. And then they say, here comes the storm. Storm comes, rain comes, it's coming, winds are blowing. We don't know what to do. We're all over the place. We had already been trained, though. We made sure that we had all of our department heads become first responders, first tier at least, so we can establish a form of communication. We would better be able to deal with the city being cut off in 5, 6, 7 different pieces. You may not know this, but when Patterson floods because of these kinds of storms, the only way to travel through Patterson is through Route 80. Oh, you didn't know that? You got to go up on Route 80 and hope you can come down to get to Patterson. So when it comes to planning, we'd like to be a part of it. So we can explain to you that going the route of Route 80, that is bumper to bumper, and hoping that you can get from one point to another is not quite the best way. Not to mention, swiftwater rafting is something you heard earlier. Swiftwater rafting happens when the flow of the water, at this point in time, you're talking about 7 feet above the normal floodplain. When that water is moving as it moves, the only way you could be saved if somebody swiftly grabs you. As a joke. So, swiftwater rafting is a part of it. So we got the Irene thing going on, right? And so the water is actually percolating and bubbling through the manhole covers. I mean, it's coming up like that. That Saturday, about 4 o'clock or so, it is like spewing. We are saying, oh my gosh. I was there, my departments were there, my director of Public Works was here, Chief of Staff, and Security. We were all riding around trying to see how we can help 140,000 people with the many language barriers who get cut off by 5 or 6 to 7 bridges. What are we gonna do? So we made sure we were engaged, we made sure we were trained, we're talking to the school district, we're trying to make sure that the schools in high ground are accessible. Wait, 5 bridges got cut off. How are we going to do this? That's when we hear that the governor had a conference call, and that a regional shelter was going to be in effect, which I give credit for being proactive on that. I will give credit for that. I would say being in Bergen County, going out Route 4 to Paramus Road to Bergen County Community College didn't quite work for us. We had 5 bridges that cut us in so many pieces, and helping getting people to safety didn't quite work for us. But that was the plan. It was a part of the long-range plan, I'm assuming, because past years there were other kinds of hectic conditions, so they were trying to find something a little bit more reasonable. But the question is, who did you ask? Because we weren't asked. We were instead told. This is what it's going to be. Now, we have seniors like many other towns have seniors. We have folks in multiple high-rises. Our police department had water to where the police department was completely ineffective and unusable. Okay? You saw the pictures of the Kansas chickens sitting there. You could only see the top of the roof line. You saw the vehicles. You saw it. Who knew? Nobody could have known. We just couldn't have known. But at the downstream part where we were, we had what was a result of the regular rains, which was happening up county and down county, the strong winds, and the fact that we're the bowl, we're the basin. So we got ours and yours.
We like to share.
And we appreciate it sometimes. So the problem got dramatically more intense, and we are now getting direction from the process called the ROC. Our OEM coordinator and all of our volunteers cannot make decisions. For the most part they can, but not the big decisions without calling up. Not they have to wait for the okay, but they have to let folks know. If you're going to move somebody, who are you going to move, how are you going to get them there? And I want to say thank you to New Jersey Transit. And if that's a part of the state's activation, that was a good one. New Jersey Transit buses did show up and help us move folks from where they were in dangerous conditions to not so dangerous conditions. There's no doubt. New Jersey Transit helped get us, our folks, to Eastside High School. We were able to work cooperatively with the public schools so that the facility could accommodate cots and beds. Unfortunately, what we learned was the schools, because they had not had that same kind of planning, didn't have adequate showers. So we had to get our internals together. But to answer the question, the state had the first line of responsibility. Gotcha. The state had the first line of responsibility, and I know that we communicated. Was I satisfied? No, but I'll never be. That's just the Marine in me. Semper Fi. I'll never be. Is there room for progress? Yes. But it has to start with a willingness for all to sit at the table and talk, and folks to want to hear all sides. This one-way street kind of conversation has to end. And at this juncture, I'm saying that. At the lowest level, there's no reason for us not to have a USGS gauge. And if you do the research, you'll find out, and you'll probably ask the same thing we asked. Why don't we, as Patterson, have a USGS gauge? That's something somebody needs to work on. And I'll let the next person speak. I'm sorry.
I'll keep it very short. As was pointed out, the initial response is generally a local area. The local area responsibility is the local police, the local public works, it's the local police and fire, first aiders. That, there clearly was state and federal presence. The area that I felt and still feel could use significant improvement is the recovery effect. People have been out of their house. The houses have been damaged. They're trying to restore themselves. They're trying to get back in. The ability to get with flood insurance, get their flood insurance checks, review substantial damage, that is an area where it seems to be very slow. I don't have an exact count, but I would guess in Wayne Township alone, there's probably 50 to 100 homes still unoccupied as a result of the flooding because they have not been able to resolve the issues, get their checks, and either move on or move back in.
I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to try to shift to talk about the economic impact. Specifically, I'd like to ask about the businesses that, after the flooding, you know, can you give us a sense for your municipality, how many businesses stayed and rebuilt, how many left, and do you have a sense of how many jobs were lost?
It's probably, the answer to that's going to be different for, and I have a minute. The answer to that question is going to be different, I think, for all four of us. And as I was listening to the dean talk and introduce the question, I was thinking that this is kind of small, larger, and largest in terms of the impacts and the townships and the municipalities, cities that are represented here. For Little Falls, for the township of Little Falls, the damage is primarily residential. There are some businesses that were affected by it. But I can tell you that the economic impact, and Assemblyman Romana and I were at probably one of the last press conferences with Alex DeCroce before he passed away. And we had, the Assemblyman had asked many business owners from the area to come in and to talk about the economic impact, and I won't steal that because I'm sure he'll talk about that. But locally, for a very small town of 2.8 square miles, that storm, and I don't remember quite honestly if it was Lee or Irene or a combination of both, cost us about $800,000, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money in anybody's budget and anybody's line items. The thing that I have tried to tell people for years, I have a little more time, is that that economic impact is not spread out only on the people that are affected by the water. It affects every single resident, every single business owner in the township, in all of our municipalities and our cities. There's a car wash at the end of the bridge that separates Wayne from Little Falls on Route 23. The gentleman's name is Joe D'Angelo, I think. DiNapoli, the Italian name, I just couldn't remember it. And I met Joe during the floods because that was kind of this place that would separate Wayne and Little Falls, and once that shut down, people couldn't get into Willowbrook. And I'd asked him one day about how it affected his business. Obviously, his business is shut down. In terms of economics, how much did he lose? And he told me that he probably lost about $5,000 per week. That's a lot of money for a small business because you'll never make that up. The one thing that he did say that was a little bit more telling was that not only did I lose in that type of business the dollars that came in every week, but I may have lost the customers forever because the people that can't drive by my business have obviously found a better way to go. And when they went that other way, they may have gone now past another car wash. And that may, and I see Deb Hoffman shaking her head in terms of economic development in the county, that may forever impact on him. And I don't think that there's a real good way of trying to calculate what those losses are, because those are unclaimed revenues that you will never, ever see again. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because it's the thing that gets lost in the shuffle. Let me preface the remark by stating this: in our heart and at the front of our mind all the time is everybody in this room who's a homeowner who lives with this problem. Make no mistake about it. So when we talk about economics, it's not skipping everybody here at all. Everybody here is the first thought. But right behind you is the economics of this problem. And it's absolutely critical for everybody to understand. So let's look at what we've lost. There is one tenant left in David's Bridal Strip Mall. A&P, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, gone. Not here. Hundreds of jobs when you combine those businesses alone. The U.S. Post Office is closed. It's been closed for a year and change now in Mountain View. Patterson, an industrial section, the Bunker Hill section there. I don't know how many businesses have not come back. Talk about a city, by the way, that needs every last job it can get its hands on for the citizens that live in the city of Patterson. Woodland Park, if you know what, you go anywhere in the region, we have lost businesses. Willowbrook alone closed for 13 days. There are 20,000 jobs in Willowbrook Mall alone. If we lose these places, we lose the economic foundation of the region. One of the things that the folks at Willowbrook, because we've been having a lot of meetings with the major interests in Willowbrook who have been working with us, meeting with Senator Lautenberg, meeting with Senator Menendez to try to get this train moving a lot faster. And that stuff has not been publicized, but I'm telling you what's going on. It's going on all the time. We had another meeting scheduled for next week. Unfortunately, that's going to be rescheduled, but we've been having consistent meetings. The retail folks have been very, very open with what they face because everybody in this room has been flooded out. Let's talk about those 5 big floods. In 5 major floods, you've replaced your hot water heater every time. You've replaced your furnace every time. You've replaced your washer and dryer every time. And guess what? You don't have the money in the bank that you used to have after 5 floods. So guess what you're not doing? You're not buying the extra winter coat. You're not buying the extra clothes. And you know what the retail folks are saying in the region? Boy, we're losing our business. We're losing our customers because they don't have money. So these people who are those business interests, they're our best friends, folks, because they've got one thing that we just don't have on our own, and that is the ear of people, because they've got lobby people down in Washington, D.C. that work to our and their benefit. And that's how some of these meetings have been taking place. So where do we go from here? I have to laugh. I got to mention Bobby Lyons' comment about the fact that we cleared out the courthouse. I got to go back to this again. We're not buying out the courthouse in Passaic County, folks. It's not happening. You know, we have to fix the problem. $3 to $4 billion in economic losses in the last 6 years in this region as a result of this flood problem. We need a big solution. It's going to cost us a lot of money, but that $3 to $4 billion becomes $8 becomes 12, becomes 16, becomes 20 in not too short a time frame, or not too long a time frame, rather. We will get there. The expense of fixing the problem is going to be costly, but the expense of not fixing the problem is going to far surpass the cost of fixing the problem. And I want to end with that, and hopefully we've sent the message here tonight. Thank you.
I brought my own props. This is just a map produced by our engineer, because we have been chronicling floods throughout the years, at least since this administration has been in office. And we wanted to see, we did little markers and things so we can see the progression of the flood waters. What I'm going to show you is two colors. One represents the normal flood pattern, and the red represents this recent flood pattern. Now, all those little specks of blue were normally where we would flood. All the crimson is the latest flood pattern. Now, that's depth and other things have not been identified on this to show you that we might be talking 6, 7 feet additional. Let me speak to and close out, because I did speak the last time. I had to get a note. The reality is, in terms of businesses and jobs, is that Patterson still remains the industrial engine in Passaic County. Make no mistake about it. You can't pay your go to county court and all those other county-based services unless you go to the city. So when the 5 bridges are done, it's done. People can't go, they can't work. So we are still trying to figure out what that cost is. Then the local businesses, the mom pop, the small hairdresser, things like that, they are devastated. Guess what? There are some who are still not operating. When they went to FEMA and whatever else, and just for an aside, what I don't know, but I've not been able to get anybody to clarify for me, when we had a storm, a snowstorm not long ago, and each of the cities, municipalities had to submit their bills so that the state would then submit its bill to FEMA, the state of New Jersey, to my knowledge, does not have an emergency plan in terms of by which it can compensate cities or help cities during the snowstorms. So we're out $500,000. If, in fact, that was never rectified, and if that's not part of this plan, but the condition is, whatever the challenge is by us collectively, we have to wait to get this number, and then that number, which gets activated by FEMA intervention, then if it doesn't rise, if it doesn't rise to the level, we're all on our own. So what the report doesn't speak to is, why doesn't the state have, and this is nobody's fault, but there's no conversation, why doesn't the state have that segment in the middle by which we talk about those emergencies? And then the last thing is, in terms of imbalance, the first panel went for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and I appreciated hearing all the stuff about the isotopes and things like that. We've got 20 minutes to talk about the real impact as it has affected us in our cities. My point is, let's have another dialogue by which that impact at the levels that it's at, with some discussion with some other folks, so that we can begin to work that plan as the Assemblyman has outlined. I don't disagree with him. We do need to take a different approach to rectifying this problem. But the process to convince many that it is an act of something and what happened, I don't buy it. I don't accept it. I expect a better response, and I expect an opportunity to be at the table so we can talk about it. Thank you.
I have nothing further to add after the fine speakers.
And just in all fairness, Assemblywoman Romano also got a note.
Oh, he got a note?
I did.
Okay, good.
All right, so we're getting really actually at the end of our time. So, and I wanted the opportunity for the audience to have their Q&A. So, just seriously, 1 minute wrap up final thoughts that you may have.
I'll go.
I mean, I just want to, you know what, Jeff, the only thing, I've said a lot of stuff here tonight. It's enough. Outside, I have a petition, and I know a lot of people in this room have signed that petition. But if you have not signed the petition is sitting on the table that is outside. You'll see my nameplate there. No, we don't want doubles. We don't want doubles. We want to make sure it's all legitimate. We have got about over 5,000 people that have signed on to this thing, so we're happy with that. But you know what? We want 25,000. So I would say if you haven't signed a petition, sign it. And if you have signed it, no, I want you to send it. I want you to send the petition out, and we have it by email. Call my office, get it sent to you by email, send it out to your friends and neighbors who, and I don't care if they don't live in the flood area, it doesn't matter. If they're affected by this problem because they're in the region, they're affected by it because they can't drive through to work, they can't shop, whatever it is, get them to sign a petition. People listen to numbers in government. And the petition, okay, I'll explain it, I'm sorry. The petition is very simple. It's just telling the federal government that we, the undersigned, strongly urge our federal and state elected officials to demand that a solution to the chronic flooding conditions in the Passaic River Basin be made a priority in the presidential budget. In this case, it was in fiscal year 2013. Doesn't matter. Get the names on the petition. If we miss this fiscal year, we go to the next fiscal year. We have a little bit of money in this year for some study work. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. We got to get to we have to push the federal government to move towards that solution. Get the petition signed, spread it around to your friends and neighbors, all right? Thank you. You can, but it's, yes, absolutely.
Just quick, I'd like to thank the college, Pat Tadeo from here, Dean Waldron, Deb Hoffman from Passaic County. I'm sorry, I just want to say thank you to everyone that put this on. I think the most important thing that we can do here is to keep the dialogue moving. Like we have said in the past, there is no one simple solution to this. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort, energy, a little bit of elbow grease. I think that we've made a lot of great strides. I know that some of us up here may not be as happy as others in terms of what some of those strides are.
Was he talking about me?
No. No,
joking.
Jeff, I'm not.
I'm joking.
But that's okay. But he has every right to be angry. We all do, as you do. But I think that we are much, much further ahead. And I think someone said before that we've taken these baby steps, but we are taking some positive steps. And it is through the support of many of the people that are out here tonight in this audience. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight, because I know it's important. Thank you.
Well, 1,200 evacuations, which led to 1,000 inspections of properties along the river, and that blue you saw. Folks, their homes are going to be destroyed if they haven't already been torn down. You know, it's devastating. I remember one woman told me when we walked through the muck and stuff that was in her basement and stuff. She said, "This is my 17th flood." So my reality is that while the message has been, and some of the conversation has been about the 5 major floods, whenever it floods, we get hit. Our solution can't be, a bigger one time, let's get the hit. It has to be folks paying attention that we're in the line of fire every time. Snow melts, saturates the land. It rains, that would be February, March, April. You get the April showers, and then the flooding nightmare starts. It's our cycle of life. No USGS gauge. We can't tell, as an early warning system, when the flood waters are coming from the next town. That's why we need this conversation. But thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Last comment. I'm one of those, quote, boots on the ground, kind of running around in a big white truck. The one thing, and we think we're pretty prepared, but for Wayne Township's perspective, I really have to give a great thanks to several volunteer groups. They stepped up. They provided services that we really didn't anticipate. We didn't realize the relocations, the areas, and they stepped in. They were tireless, and they were a great help to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are we done? Are we done?
There may be a Q&A.
Thank you all very, very much. Please stay up here, and the other panel 1, if those members will come up. I hope you're all still here. First, and while you're still getting seated, have there been studies which analyze the increase in impervious coverage for the entire Passaic River watershed? And if not, why? Anybody who feels they can contribute to an answer, feel free.
I'll take that one. There have been a number of studies looking at the increase of impervious surface in the basin. The state creates new coverages of land use every 5 years. The 2007 land use coverage is the most recent. There is aerial flights going on right now to create a new coverage of 2012 land use. But yeah, every 5 years for the past 15 or 20 years or so, there are studies showing how much more impervious surface there is in the watershed as a whole and in the various sub-watersheds.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Young, for being a wonderful partner in this. I don't think she has enough kudos tonight. The next batch of questions refer directly to the river. When are you going to dredge the river? Can we stop building new construction in upland areas? And also, somebody did respond, I think Jeff did address an issue about whether there's studies about dredging the river or widening and widening Newark Bay. And can we address this issue? Anyone has a comment, suggestion?
In general, the position has been that dredging the rivers really will not be adequate to address the larger storms. The issue that's really not within the 15-point plan is would some sort of sediment removal in certain areas have an impact? You have to look at the upstream and the downstream, and as we heard clearly, if we dredge one area, there's a potential impact there. As an engineer, as a municipal official, we're meeting on a flood task group. We're looking at those things, but right now, my understanding is that dredging, the position of the state is dredging will not have a significant effect on reducing the flooding.
I'd like to add to that, if I may, if I have a minute and the microphone is on. I agree that dredging won't solve problems. I did want to comment that part of stream ecology evolution is that it migrates, it wants to move. So that means you have scour and erosion. That erosion leads to deposition, and that deposition is like shoaling. That could cause problems with the hydraulics so the water doesn't convey. So if you have the natural progression evolution of a stream, there's erosion and then it's deposited someplace else. Removing those deposits could be helpful for the overall hydraulics, but dredging as a solution to get rid of the need for the floodplain, that's not going to happen.
And I guess the only thing to add is that there has been, through the desnagging process, there is some shoal dredging work happening as part of that process from the 15-point plan. So that aspect of things is being addressed through the efforts of the 15-point plan.
Okay, thank you. There are a number of questions about the Pompton Lake and the dam there. I'll try to combine some. First, can the Pompton Lake be lowered prior to a predicted major rainfall event? Why were the floodgates closed at 12:30 p.m. on Saturday, August 27th to remain closed until 5 a.m. on Sunday, the 28th, to allow the lake to refill? And then finally, can the recent analysis of dam results be challenged? That was in the paper in the last 2 weeks, I believe, 3 weeks.
Well, let me try to answer at least one of those points. The analysis that AECOM did and was released 2 weeks ago, I know that there were many people that were not happy with it. I'm not going to sit here and say it was good or it was bad. I think the one figure that has kind of been glossed over by many people was something that they stated when they were talking about their results, that within the last 6 years, there has been over 60 inches more precipitation than ever recorded before. That's 5 feet more of water in the last 6 years than we've ever had. It's a great amount of volume, and I think that we have to keep that statistic in mind when we think about what the remedies are going to be. Doctor, what was the other part of that on the dam? Oh, I'm sorry. I know that prior to Hurricane Irene, we were, myself, Mayor Katie Cole, I think Dave Runfeld from Lincoln Park, and one of the other mayors were called by Bob Martin, the commissioner from the DEP, and the governor. There was 5 or 6 of us on the phone, and they said that because we had asked so consistently as members of the Flood Commission to lower the dam, they did open it up, and it was lowered by 3 feet, I believe. And I think you heard the woman say in the video that had that dam not been that water not been lowered, it would have gone into her first floor. The problem is that, and this again was brought out at the study, is that the dam and the river, or what's behind it, is not a flood control area. It would have been built differently, it would have been built larger, it would have been built bigger to control and to hold more water. Dave, am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Sorry to surprise you.
Thank you.
There was another part of that I cannot answer about the time frame when the gates were open or closed.
Can I add to that? Because we're talking about using that lake as a reservoir storage, which is what you were talking to. My understanding is because the water supply company doesn't allow you to drop it 5 feet, we can't use it for, I say we because the Army Corps built it, I'm at the Army Corps, we can't use it as a detention basin. That's what it was designed for. Would it work for that purpose? Absolutely. Could you drop the water level 5 or 10 feet and make a difference? Yes, you could, but we don't have, again, the option's not on the table to do that because it's not intended to be a detention basin because it's part of the water supply, as I understand it. So that's what, well, that's politics. That's politics and water supply. And Chi, while I have the microphone and before I lose it, I have to say I feel like we're on a huge collision course between engineering solutions and land use and politics. My understanding is, I heard someone spoke about the Willowbrook Mall. My understanding, I don't know if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that was developed with the intention that you're in a floodplain and you're going to get flooded. Now you're saying, we don't want to get flooded, we want the economic benefit. You can't have both. Politics and engineering are colliding. We have a problem with that. I do. I'm done.
Thank you so much. Continue on, because I know people
Hey, Deb,
had their questions.
there is something, though, there is something that needs to be answered. Can I have that microphone?
Go ahead.
Just want to, there's one aspect of the study that just came out from AECOM. It goes back to what everybody's yelling about now that was just mentioned, that we need to drill down on in the report, because the report overall makes some broad statements about how lowering the water level behind the dam does not have a significant impact. And if you take that in the broad spectrum of the river system, that's probably accurate. But one thing that I can tell you unequivocally, and I know George Holzapfel would back me up on this, I know if Sandy Galatia was sitting here, he'd back me up on this, and all the folks in Pompton Lakes, we've seen a change in the flooding pattern. Traditionally, historically, Hoffman Grove and Old Wayne used to flood first, and if you had a significant flood, the Riverview community, which is up near the Pompton border and Pompton Lakes, would flood next or last. Since the gates went into operation, we saw a flip-flopping of that. And happens once, you can chalk it up to maybe some circumstances. It's happened now every time that we've had a significant flood since 2007 when the gates went into operation. And one of the things that we see on the graphs that's in the report is there is this gap in terms of what happened when the gates were opened and lowered previously to the storm coming in. It has an impact. It may not be significant in the broad spectrum of the problems in the river system, but it's something that in discussions with the AECOM engineer, he did state that, yes, it will have a short-term benefit. And that's the part that we need to work with the DEP and the Army Corps on, to drill down into that specific issue to see if we can get some benefit out of it. The only thing I would note is that although that statement is accurate from what I understand about Willowbrook, which was built when I was probably about 5 years old or 4 years old, And that may be what those developers decided at that time. When I'm making these statements about what's happening in this region, it's region-based. And as Holland had to deal with its problems when they needed to develop into those areas where they had to build into because they had no more room, we have a similar situation to that. And we do have solutions that we can put in place, although costly, would allow us to have a way of life here. That's the only thing that I'm advocating for, and I think that the people in the region join us in, because they know that we can't move everybody out of here. We have to figure out a way to make this a place that's not going to be flooded out yearly or twice yearly or more with these massive floods. We cannot afford to live that way in a civilized society like we have in this country and in this region. And we need to be working towards that solution. That's the only reason why I would differ with you on that point.
I've heard a couple statements of fact under this question that I disagree with, the department disagrees with, and I suggest that everybody go to the department website and take a look at the AECOM report on the floodgate itself, read the conclusions to be clear. The website's www.nj.gov/DEP/Passaic River. nj.gov/DEP/Passaic River. Look for the report. It's there. You'll see the exact conclusions of the consultants there. I also, there's a couple points that came up and I want to be clear about over the course of the evening. They're minor points, but I think they have major impacts. We have to get past the notion that a 100-year floodplain is only going to flood once every 100 years. It's a misnomer. It's not true. What it means is that there's a 1% chance of a flood occurring in that area, a 1% chance on an annual basis. It could flood 5 times a year. Now, over the course of time, we're going to adjust what a 100-year flood means in that area as we accumulate more data. But I saw it in the film, and it's a misrepresentation of what that means. The other thing is that, Hurricane Irene was such a huge storm. Before it started raining last week, if you look at the Pompton River at the gates, you had a flow of about 100 cubic feet per second. 100 cubic feet per second. Hurricane Irene, 23,000 cubic feet per second. The water downstream of the gate comes out of bank at about 2,500 cubic feet per second. People get flooded at about 7,000 cubic feet per second. And these are general numbers. They don't hold me to the exact numbers. But 23,000 cubic feet was Irene. That is a lot of water. And the gates did not affect that. And the lowering of the reservoir, the 3 feet, did not help at all. It was too much water. Yeah, the same thing in the March floods that we had since the gate was put in. I mean, it is. I'm trying to answer the question. The flooding that occurred since 2007 would have occurred in the same way with or without the gates.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
Oh, wait.
Excuse me.
I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that in-depth response. There were quite a few questions about the Beatty Dam, who owns the dam, why is the dam in Little Falls not been removed to lower the flood level north of the Little Falls? When will they do a study looking at what is happening below the dam? And what is the status of dredging of the Passaic River from Two Bridges area south to Beatty's Dam? I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, or?
Anybody from Little Falls? That's a joke, come on. The Beatty's Dam has certainly been the subject of many, many conversations over the last few years, and I will tell you right now that I am not qualified to sit here and talk completely about it. The 1989 Army Corps study that everyone refers to, there's a few parts to that. Yes, it does talk about lowering the face of the dam, but the part B of that is the impact that it would have downstream. If Jeff Jones was here right now, he'd probably be jumping up and down, but he's 100% right. The bottom line with that study and any work that has to be done with the dam is that it has to be done completely in a much, much larger picture, not just for what everyone thinks it's going to do locally. That study also says that the effect west going towards Fairfield and Wayne has a diminished effect as it goes further away from the dam. I'm not an engineer, and I can't tell you anything more than what I've been told about that. The dam, there are some ownership issues with it. After the March flood of 2010, I met with the commissioner from Passaic Valley Water Commissioner Joe Bella, and we went over a lot of the issues with the dam, and it is certainly something that's on the table. A gentleman from the Army Corps talked about a commodity and talked about water. What the people from Passaic Valley Water Commission will tell you, what they told me, and I think I can at least reiterate those points, is that the water that goes over that dam is a commodity. They sell it. They provide water to almost 1 million people within the region. One of the things that came up 2 weeks ago from Commissioner Martin was that had we reacted in March of 2012 based on what we believed we learned from the storms of March 2011 and March 2010, it would have put us that much closer to a drought. The problem with most of this is that we're trying to make a system work on a predictive basis when we really don't know what's going to happen. I know it's not a great answer about the dam. There are still many conversations going on about it. Unfortunately, we're just not that much closer. It's more to it than just taking it down and letting the water flow out more rapidly, or that much more water faster going down towards Woodland Park and Patterson. And for those people that are there, we have to also respect what's going to happen to them if that was to happen. So that project is a much, much larger global project when it comes to doing something at the dam.
Do I have time? Because I'm hearing this not just tonight, but other times frequently about dredging and what that will do, because I'm an engineer from the Army Corps looking at hydraulics. I think it's kind of a misconception that dredging will solve major flood problems. You can dredge, but if you're not, I'm not trying to be funny, but if you're not dredging down 300 feet, you're still going to need the floodplain, and that's where your problems are, is in the floodplain. You spoke about the hydraulics of removing any dam. It doesn't have a global impact on your watershed. It has a backwater effect that extends only a certain distance upstream. I don't know the specifics about Beatty Dam because I wasn't involved with that study, but I know there's a lot of talk about removing that, and I think that's a little bit of a misconception too. Like channel dredging, it's not going to solve all your problems. If you remove Beatty's Dam, it's not going to solve all the problems upstream. It could be one piece of many pieces to help, but it's not something that's going to make huge differences. But immediately upstream of Beatty's Dam, it could make some benefits, but then downstream, that could be problematic too.
Okay, we have time for just one more question, I believe, and I'm going to include this just because these are, I hope, quick answers. When are any of the house elevations going to break ground in Little Falls? Anybody know that?
It's me again. Joanne Bergen had to leave. Joanne is our grant writer in Little Falls and had really worked with me hand in hand for the last 3 years about this project. The first home elevations and acquisitions are probably taking a little bit longer than we thought. However, they were scheduled to begin in the spring of 2012. So we are right there. I know that Hans and Mike, Larry are here right now, and these folks here, and I'm sure that many of you too, are directly affected by that. And I know that that project is pretty much on track. The one thing that was said before about how long it takes, and somebody mentioned, I think you mentioned about how long it takes for a project like this. And you know, when you're working in a 12-month cycle, hoping that it's not going to rain within the next 10 or 11 months and suffer another flood, that 24-month period or 30-month period to get something done like this is obviously not a short enough project for everyone. but the project in our town is right on course for those homes, and in probably almost 100 homes when it's all said and done. So it's a monumental project for our township. I can't, George, I can't talk to Wayne.
On elevations, I don't think well, on buyouts, we're going to be demolishing the 25 or 26 structures in Huffman Grove. My understanding is there's 2 buyout programs, one through FEMA, one through state NJDEP, about severe repetitive losses. Those are moving forward, but I don't have a time frame on that. All elevations within Wayne Township are being done as a result of the individuals and the individuals' homeowners insurance and floodplain insurance. If they had flood insurance, they had substantial damage, and as was indicated, substantial damage is 50% of the value of the structure, they could apply for, and many people have applied for, gotten the substantial damage monies of $30,000 to supplement the cost to elevate their structures. I believe we had about 6 to 10 structures raised as a result of that. But we have no township program for elevations. We are going on the buyout in the severe repetitive and the floodway areas. Is what coming up? I don't have the information. I don't know the status of the DEP and the FEMA program. You'd have to call Sandy Galatio at the Township Office of Emergency Management.
Okay, I'm sorry, but maybe individual questions could be asked afterward if the panelists are willing to stay, but our time is up. I really thank all of you for your time and your expertise. It's been wonderful. And thank you all for coming.